Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Tough day to start with again today. Another crazy news morning. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2017. And I don't know. I give up. I guess we're done. And the United States was nice and all, but forget it. It's all turned stupid, and I don't like it anymore. And I don't know. Can I comment on the news today? What can I tell you? The Federalist magazine, such as it is, which, by the way, was entirely convinced that I had all my understanding of the United States Senate and how it works upside down and just couldn't stop tweeting about how stupid I was, is featuring an editorial today that basically says, you know, if Roy Moore raped my 14-year-old daughter, I'd be like angry and stuff, and I might even kick him, but I'd vote for him. So that's where we are. Oh, well, nice experiment and everything. It was fantastic for a while, and we made some nice patriotic songs. There were some good parades and stuff. I like Sparklers a lot. We did well with that. And other than that, though, I guess we can pack it in. Bret Stephens is editorializing in the New York Times that who cares? I didn't read it. I read what he tweeted about it, which was Donald Trump isn't mentally ill. He's not mentally unwell. He's Putin-esque. And I guess that's supposed to mean like his sop to, well, that's bad. It's bad to be Putin-esque. Of course, he's not Putin-esque. If a demented monkey begins imitating the movements that Vladimir Putin makes in public, that doesn't make the monkey Putin-esque. It just means an idiotic monkey is imitating him. That doesn't really help us with anything. Of course, the tax bill marches on. It's completely upside down. Yeah, we're about to elect the senator who, molests teenagers, but it's okay. And in fact, it might even be okay if he molested my teenager. That's fine with me because family values. P.S. Then we're going to get there, and we don't even need his vote at this point. We're going to do this without him. Vote for a tax cut for the richest and a tax hike for the poorest. And let's see, what else can we throw in there? Oh, yes, the Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans have no problem whatsoever moving ahead with the nomination of Brett Talley, who has never tried a case in his life, is 3 years out of law school, used to be a paranormal investigator, that would mean / ghost hunter, and he left a little something off of his disclosure forms. They asked him, of course, do you have anyone in your immediate family who works in government? And he said, no, I don't. And they said, are you sure? Because I think you left someone off. They didn't even actually say it. The newspapers figured this out. Oh, yeah, that's right. My wife works in government. Really? Where? Chief of staff for the White House counsel's office, the people who put forward judicial nominations. In other words, my wife nominated me for this job because I'm otherwise totally unqualified for it. Okay, that's fine with us. Let's just move forward with this. I don't see why we should hold this against you, given that nobody else ever disclosed anything. Jared Kushner said he never had any contacts with any foreign governments. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. I mean, over 100 of them. The guy who's the Attorney General of the United States completely lied to us. And we were thinking that he might make a great replacement for the child molester, but never mind, we'll take the child molester. Okay, great. Oh, well, that's just sort of the way it is, I guess. And golly, responsible Republicans out there now writing fantastic op-eds for us about the need for a third party. How about murdering everyone in your party? That's really honestly what probably ought to happen. But you can't advocate for that in this country because blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, it is being advocated for over on the other side. As I'm tongue-in-cheek, I'm tweeting this morning, but it's not even tongue-in-cheek. It's just literally the kind of interactions you'll find on Twitter and elsewhere. Our policies are going to be awesome. The idea that I have about cutting taxes for the rich and increasing taxes on the poor, sure, why not? And it's a great idea. Our policies are going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic going forward. Really? Is it? Because actually, that's precisely the sort of thing that can push us into depression. And then at this point, really, honestly, civil war. Oh, yeah? Well, maybe that's great because maybe I want civil war, huh? Did you ever think of that? Okay, both sides. Let's compromise. Maybe we could have a little give and take here. No, I'm going to shut down the government and blame you on top of it all. You know what? Okay, fine, sure. Maybe we can work out a deal or something because, all right. I give up. I don't even know where to go with this. Okay, I'm done with that. Daily Kos Radio is live now, Bill says, from Portland, Maine. I think he senses what's going on a little bit in my head. What does he say here? Hey, ho, ho. Kagro X is hosting the show. Hey, what else can you say? Honestly. I also, I note with some, I don't know, with a wry smile, I guess we'll say, on my face, as I picked up, this thing over via Twitter. I saw, let's see, where did I put it? I don't know. My pocket thing isn't even open yet. I can't even decide which direction to go with. Greg will help us with this. But I saw Tegan Goddard's Political Wire noting a Vox.com piece, which usually means Vox.com is my favorite source for reading about stuff I realized last week, but they take great care in explaining to me why I realized it last week. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good. Is it good affirmation? Do people like it for that? A lot of people, of course, haven't realized something just yet because they're busy. They're doing lots of amazing work elsewhere. And then they read this thing and say, you know what? That matches exactly the conclusion I would have come to based on these facts. I like this Vox.com. They're not dumb. They're not wrong. They're just slow. Anyway, so today's discovery was Ezra Klein, who's, I think, when I say slow, I mean it really literally takes them a long time because they're deliberate and careful people, thoughtful people. I understand what they're doing. Ezra Klein, I think, among the slower of them because he's the most deliberate and he carefully considers what he's going to say, especially when he's going to say something like this. But that's the way it is. The case for normalizing impeachment. Okay, I'm glad to see it. It's a nice headline. It grabbed my eye. It worked, Tegan Goddard. It got you a click that, well, I mean, you didn't write this thing. He did. And I still click on you and not Vox. Anyway, you're doing something right over there as well. The case for normalizing impeachment. I haven't read it yet. It's long. Maybe we'll read it. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll discuss some of it. It struck me because, well, I've been making the case for normalizing impeachment for a long time. Since before this show. Since before Congress Matters. Since before I began writing on the front page of Daily Kos, as a matter of fact. Of course, I was talking about George W. Bush at the time, and he deserved it, and a lot of people think that he didn't. And I wonder whether the upshot of this experiment, this idiotic experiment with Donald Trump, I know it's making people think better, believe it or not, of George W. Bush. And we keep reminding you here, you shouldn't think any better of him. But he did some horrible things that really did warrant impeachment. But certainly the case is clearer for Donald Trump. It's a different kind of case, but it's still clearer. And it's clear enough on policy grounds, too. But it's clear on a number of other grounds, like his being mentally unfit and unable to carry out this job. But other than that, I guess I was just sort of startled to see the case being made and the headline being used and normalizing impeachment. It's an important discussion to have. And it made me think of that discussion that we had back in 2005 and 2006, where I was literally, my discussion was, you got to normalize consideration of impeachment. Everybody's afraid of the word. You bring it up and Democrats will hush you. No. And then when there was a possibility of it happening because Democrats took back control of Congress immediately, or even before they took back control, as a premise of their taking back control, the Democratic leadership, wisely or not, I can't judge for you right now. I can, but I don't have time to. Said impeachment's off the table. That will allay your fears and put us back in control. And don't worry, nothing radical will happen. Okay, whatever. But I mean, I really was advocating literally for the normalization of the consideration of impeachment. And the campaign literally was, I want you to follow the advice of the freeway blogger. He had, I thought, a great methodology for this. Literally, I want you to get big pieces of cardboard, paint them white like a newspaper would be. I advocated Times Roman font. Make it look like a newspaper headline. But just put that word out there. Just the word impeach, period, would be enough. I want people to see the word and stop crapping their pants every time they see it. And hang it on a bridge overpass over a freeway. Literally put it out there in public. Make people look at it. Make people become, get comfortable with the idea that this is a real thing. It's not an idiotic latter-day invention or something weird that I came up with, that you could sneak through the Senate through some arcane procedure. It was written into the Constitution. The founding fathers thought this was a great idea. They wrote it into the Constitution. You got to have this. There's nothing it shouldn't have to be normalized. It's in there. But apparently we've gotten to that. But so I'm glad that now that we have an even crazier president are finally having people say, you know what, we ought to be normalizing this after all. We're going to have to normalize this for a lot more than the president, by the way, if this Brett Talley thing goes forward. He's going to be one of several judges we're going to have to tear out root and branch and impeach. And we're going to have to change the definitions that we were given, sort of, in the Constitution. We weren't really given any definition about why you would impeach a judge, but basically their life tenure during times of good behavior. We're going to have to think about what good behavior means and what time means, for that matter, too. Einstein can help us with that. In the meantime, time, again, coming into play. Greg Dworkin, hi. I know you have some organized thoughts to share with us. Would you like to start now?
Sure. You know what? I'm going to start at the bottom and work our way up. This is the list that I send David in the morning so we can at least send me share some of the stuff I wind up talking about. So
it's
it doesn't
easy to
totally
scroll
come
to
out
the
of
bottom. I like that.
Outer space. And on the bottom, I have a piece from Dave Leonhardt called Time to Talk Impeachment in the New York Times.
It's like there's a movement on.
Yeah, well, it's part of the broader movement of what the heck is wrong with Trump.
Yeah, Arlo says two people's a movement, so.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think, what was it, the 50th anniversary was just this past Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Of Alice's Restaurant. So, anyway,
where's my
this
walker?
is, a few weeks ago, Leonhardt writes, I read a short new book by the legal scholar Cass Sunstein titled simply Impeachment.
Oh.
The book doesn't mention Trump once. Sunstein started writing it, he told me, partly because he was alarmed by what he considered reckless talk of impeachment during Trump's first weeks on the job before he had started doing much.
Reckless.
And his goal was to lay out a legal and historical framework for thinking about impeachment, independent of any specific president. I've been thinking about the topic a lot since finishing the book, and I want to recommend both that and the Vox piece published this morning by Ezra Klein.
There you are.
To be clear, I think it would be a mistake for Democrats to put much energy into impeachment right now, and that's because it's not going to happen. Republicans control Congress and show no interest. But
yes, right. I heard that in 2005.
I also think it would be a mistake for Americans to be in denial about the governing crisis. Let's admit it. Trump is behaving in ways that call for serious talk of impeachment. If you read the careful history from Sunstein of what the founders believed it was appropriate and necessary, I expect you'll come to the same conclusion. So what Leonhardt is saying is it may not go anywhere now, but it's perfectly appropriate to start talking about it, and it's good that you talk about it. And the part about Vox I just thought I would throw in is that Voxplainers are great because they collect all the links into one place, and that's the thing you can send your friends when you're trying to support what it is that you're saying, if you're one of those people who likes to do that with data. In other words, Ezra Klein, ex-blogger, acts like a blogger with links. Mm-hmm. And, puts it in one place so that you can refer to it later. That's the thing I like about it. So it may be slow, as you point out, in terms of the time that it takes to meticulously put this together. But, that's what we bloggers do.
That's what meticulousness calls for. I mean, it can't be done quickly. It's going to be done quicker, but not by them.
It's not that, straightforward newspaper people don't do this, but they don't give you as many links as we do.
Right. All I'm saying is, like getting the news early, and it isn't getting the news early. It's using the news to tell you what the news is before people realize, hey, this is happening a lot. This, too, is the same. We all reach this conclusion. Why do we reach this conclusion? Because we've read all the links that he provides. And we read them in
but
real
sometimes
time.
we just talk about him, and that's why we do it early. So one of the things Klein said is there are plenty of people who simply should not be president of a nuclear hyperpower, and Trump's one of them. This is a truth known by his staff, known by Republicans in Congress, and known by most of the country, that so few feel able to even suggest doing the obvious thing and replacing him with a Republican who's better suited to the single most important job in the world is bizarre. Which gets to your point of why shouldn't you be able to talk about this stuff? That was the whole point of why it exists. You're not inventing something that doesn't exist. It's there.
Right. Honestly, is it any crazier than anything else? I'm reading the Constitution to you. That's supposed to be great and foundational and conservative.
So let's talk about some of the things that are leading to this kind of crazy impeachment talk.
Yeah.
Here's a piece, I guess the straightforward, roundabout way of doing it was in the Washington Post this morning. And that's a piece about Trump veering past the guardrails, feeling impervious to the uproar he causes.
Yeah, he does.
It's a piece by Philip Rucker and Ashley Parker.
I see it.
And they just point out if there are consequences for his actions, and they're including the things like the fake Muslim videos that he posted yesterday.
Yes.
If there are consequences, oh, by the way, that also got England upset, and the prime minister upset, and conservatives in parliament upset, and basically told Trump he's disinvited. It was bad. You shouldn't have done that. If there are consequences for his actions, Trump does not seem to feel their burden personally. The Republican tax bill appears on track for passage, putting the president on the cusp of his first major legislative achievement. Not a done deal, by the way. We'll talk about that in a minute. Trump himself remains the highest profile man accused of sexual improprieties to keep his job with no repercussions. Trump has internalized the belief that he can largely operate with impunity. People close to him said his political base cheers him on. Fellow Republican leaders largely stand by him. They are the ones I fault even more than Trump. I don't think Trump is competent. I think he's crazy. But his fellow Republicans, the enablers, are despicable because they let this happen. His staff scrambles to explain away his misbehavior, even to laugh it off, and the White House disciplinarian, Chief of Staff John F. Kelly, has said it's not his job to control the president.
Yes, F. John Kelly.
Okay, so that's the straightforward scenario. Here's Robert Schlesinger writing in U.S. News. All the presidents, fill in the blank. What's the next word?
Women.
All the president's delusions.
Oh.
The Access Hollywood tape is fake, like Obama's birth certificate in Trump's own head. All that's old is new again. And for President Donald Trump, all his disproven delusions are true again. Birtherism is back, baby, at least for the chief resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So are his popular vote majority, his buoyant poll numbers, historic pace of achievement, and that tape where he famously bragged about his ability to sexually assault women. It's a fraud.
Right.
Trump utters untruths at a rate and scope which would make even the most soulless of career politicians blush, but according to a pair of new reports, he's reveling in some of his greatest hits, assertions that transcend mere mistruth and indisputably belied by actual fact, sort of rare heights of ludicrous delusion. So there's a piece from Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Martin, famously. You may have talked about it in the show yesterday. I think maybe we did, about his questioning the Access Hollywood tape even after he apologized for it. And he's claimed that he lost the popular vote because of widespread voter fraud. And, he has other greatest hits, too, which is also pointed out, fake poll numbers. And as so many aspects of the Trump era, this would be all hilarious if the stakes weren't so high, writes Schlesinger. Even more to the point, Stephen Collinson, writing in CNN this morning, Trump's behavior raises questions of competency. And Joe Scarborough went on a rant this morning on Morning Joe about how aides have told him that Trump is completely incompetent. And when is he supposed to, don't talk about it. When he's supposed to talk about it? After we have the nuclear war with North Korea that Trump wants?
After your wedding.
Scarborough. Right? So after your wedding, right? after he accuses you of murdering the intern,
Yeah,
which is what he did on Twitter yesterday.
Right. He's still doing the wedding, though.
Mm.
I fully believe that. He'll show. He'll do it. And they'll take it.
On Wednesday, Trump caused outrage and sparked fears of violent reprisals against Americans and U.S. interests overseas by, remember, tweets have consequences, just as elections do, by retweeting graphic anti-Muslim videos by an extreme far-right British hate group. Earlier this week, he used a racial slur in front of Native American war heroes. He's attacked global press freedom after cozying up to autocrats on his recent Asia tour, and now there are reports that the president has revived conspiracy theories about former President Barack Obama's birthplace and is suggesting an Access Hollywood video in which he was heard boasting sexually assaulting women and for which he apologized last year had been doctored. In normal times, it would be a concern that the president is conducting himself in a manner so at odds with the decorum and propriety associated for over 2 centuries with the office he holds, but the sudden escalation in the North Korean crisis following the Stalinist state's launch of its most potent ever missile on Tuesday takes the world across a dangerous threshold. So they're worried about Trump, given the fact, again, that North Korea is actually a major issue. They're really worried that he's getting us into a war.
That could be problematic. Only well, I don't know if it would rise to the level of like tan suit or jeans and sitting on the desk, but it's pretty bad.
Because both sides, right?
Right.
So you have this whole question about his competency at a time that people are not only questioning his mental stability, but his ability to handle these complex issues. In other words, this is the most difficult job in the world, even harder than being mayor of New York City, which is the second most difficult job in the world. And, he's not up to the job, and it matters. So what happens? Well, then it's left for the Republican Party to kind of run things as if he's the figurehead and they just do things and he's supposed to say yes and everybody's happy with it. Of course, everybody's unhappy with it. And what do we get as a result? We get this terrible tax bill as part of it. Now, Republicans voted 52 to 48 yesterday to agree to a motion to proceed. That in and of itself doesn't mean they get 52 votes. We saw that with the health care bill. There's plenty of Republicans who say, I want to have this debate. I want to get my chance to add the amendments. Most of them will say, okay, you gave me my shot, even though it got voted down. I'm voting for it anyway. A few may decide that that's not the case. Susan Collins is still making noises about being unhappy about the automatic Medicare cuts. And she notified Mitch McConnell she needs to have those leave. We don't know what McCain will do. Corker and Flake are still on the table in terms of not being definite yeses. We know Ron Johnson was going to fold, and Daines and some of the other Main Street business conservatives, because they just always do. But we saw with the health care bill, sometimes there can be surprises. So it looks like it's on the way to passage, but we don't know.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, people can, and rarely, but they do.
Right.
Vote to
it will be a
proceed.
different coalition of 3. In other words, it may be McCain, Corker, and Collins, not McCain, Murkowski, and Collins. Murkowski's going to be yes because she got Anwar drilling, and that's what she wanted. Could she change her mind because they decided at the last minute things couldn't happen? Could Flake and Corker decide that their trigger for increasing taxes, if revenue isn't what this bill says it is, and we all know it won't be, happens? Every other Republican hates that. Why do they hate that? It's not because they're deficit hawks. That's really not what drives the Republican Party these days. I think, it all goes back to Upton Sinclair a century ago. It's difficult to convince a man of something when his salary depends upon not understanding it.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that everybody hates the Republicans. Everybody hates them. Their own party hates them. Their base hates them. Democrats certainly hate them. Independents hate them. And so who do they have? They have rich donors. They got like a handful of donors that give them billions of dollars, and that's who they have to satisfy. That's who their constituency is. Yeah. And so you can't expect Republicans, for the most part, in Congress to go against their donors because that's all they have.
Yeah.
And that's why most of them are going to say, I know this is awful and terrible, but we're going to do it anyway. There's another angle on this, though, that I thought was really fascinating. Ron Brownstein has a piece here in The Atlantic, an 11th hour raid by the wealthiest baby boomers. I don't remember whether it's in the list, but I'll put it at the bottom so you can find it easy.
Okay.
And the Republican tax plan would stick young people with the bill, right as political influence is shifting to America's diverse younger generations. Emphasis on diverse. Okay, companion piece, I suppose, is Ishan Tharoor, who writes in the Washington Post, "There's no hiding from Trump's bigotry," and that was based on the anti-Muslim fake videos that not only did he post yesterday, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the soulless liar who covers his press secretary, basically defended it, saying, even if it's not true, so what? The point is that we wanted to make a point.
Yes.
So here's the concept. You have a bunch of old, rich white guys.
We do.
Who finally are in power the way they want. And they know it's temporary. And they know that the next generation is coming up and hates them. In fact, everybody else already hates them. So what do? Well, in order to try to keep power, they'll try to manipulate things. They'll suppress the vote. They'll throw in these voter ID things. They'll do anything they possibly can. They'll try to get convicted felons to not have the right to vote. That's been done in several states. The fact that the people in question happen to be proportionally poor and minority is not accidentally associated with this. And so they'll try to gerrymander. They'll do everything they can to keep themselves in power, even though the popular vote may be against them. We saw that in Virginia, where at the state house level, majority vote for the Democrats and 50-50 tie.
Yes.
Okay. And they even deliberately make mistakes and make it difficult to vote by splitting districts and making it really confusing for everybody, because what the heck?
Yeah. All sorts of weird.
So all this happens, and then they decide that's not enough. I mean, the fact is that this generation behind us is coming up and trying to steal all our money. So let's steal it from them. And that's what this tax bill is.
That's almost a rational reaction.
Yeah.
Biggest mistake we made, no death panels.
Yeah,
we should have kept those.
We're going to die anyway, so let's just steal all the money, and by the time it gets to be settled, we're gone, so F you. That's that's the title of this tax bill.
That's very long. What's the acronym for that? We'll figure that out during this next break. How about that? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Hi, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. For all the good it'll do you, we are back and ready to discuss, more. I don't know if are we done with the topic of the insane president, or is that all we've got today? Because that's okay. Well,
it's what the country's got for the next little while here.
Good.
So, Philip Bump summed up the current state of the tax bill with its headline, "Deeply Unpopular Congress Aims to Pass Deeply Unpopular Bill for Deeply Unpopular President to Sign." And again, it goes back to, well, but why are they doing this? And again, it's because they're desperately trying to do everything they can to stay in power. There's an interesting piece here about that in a tangential way that I thought you'd find fascinating. It's not your typical headline. This is from Politico. Let me just read it to you. Senate GOP campaign arm stole donor data from House Republicans.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. I didn't get it.
Former NRCC aides used their old passwords to break into a database of highly valuable information on contributors. And that's because Senate Republicans are having trouble raising money.
Okay.
Why are they having trouble raising money? Because everybody hates them.
Oh.
And so what happened is the donors said, you haven't passed anything. We hate you too. Oh, my God, you can't hate us. You're the only ones we have left. So they're desperate to do anything to save their own hides by getting back in good with these donors.
Yeah.
But they realized they don't have any money, so then they went looking for other sources of money because they couldn't get it legitimately. They do what Republicans do, and they went to get it illegitimately.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting and weird story, although it does actually, I'm reminded of something else to think about. Just because of what we were talking about earlier, this idea that this idea keeps getting put forward. This is why we're doing this thing. The donors say they're going to cut us off. They hate us. We haven't done anything. They're not going to support us anymore unless we pass this tax bill. And I'm watching at the same time the pundit class, the Republican pundit class, overtly Republican pundit class, writing editorials. If you raped my daughter, it would be okay. I'll still vote for you. And I'm wondering, how valid is the worry that the donors are going to walk?
Well,
I don't know why I want to encourage them.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Right? This is from The Federalist.
Yes.
The editor of The Federalist is Ben Domenech.
Yes.
Do you know the funding for The Federalist?
I don't know.
No, you do not.
No,
you know why you don't? Because nobody knows.
Yeah, okay, good. I was right. I mean, I'm right that I don't know. That's what I mean.
So the point there being
yes,
that who's directing this? You don't know.
Right.
Is it the Mercers? Is it the Koch? Is it the same people we were just talking about? Because, I mean, you can't make a living publishing The Federalist with crap like this.
No, you shouldn't be able to, but they do.
You can't. You can't. Well, because somebody's funding them. Who is it?
Well, and it can only be the donors. That's
right.
What the donors
do. Why is this not part of the same, what we used to call wingnut welfare, stuff?
It is. So what does this mean? This means that they don't need to pass the tax cut in order to keep the donors, because the donors aren't going anywhere. There's nowhere for them to go.
The donors can decide not to donate.
They could.
The donors would like this thing passed regardless. The donors will be happy to fund people like the Federalists so long as they get their votes. They don't really care how they get it. Whether or not Roy Moore is fit for the Senate or not is not their problem. They want another vote for their agenda.
Yeah, they do. I just don't know whether I don't know if it's I'm really it's a good excuse for them.
What does it take? I mean, well, Trump is crazy and he did this Access Hollywood tape. Well, you have to ignore that. Now, we're going to actually spend a lot of time funding outlets, people, things, Project Veritas, maybe the Federalists, we don't know because we don't know where the funding comes from, in order to try to undermine normal barriers for letting us get our agenda. There's, again, another fascinating piece in the Washington Post. Women's efforts to infiltrate the Washington Post dated back months.
I read that. She's wasting her life.
She tried to get in good with the reporters. She lied about her name. She went and pretended to be an up-and-coming reporter and wanted to be introduced to other reporters. Got them in the social circles. She used to show up to bar celebrations for somebody retiring or moving to a different job. I mean, they were really working hard at this. And Robbie Mook pointed out that these folks were all over their campaign last year, and they actually had to have special training on how to identify folks who were trying to do this because they were just getting to be so annoying.
Right.
But my point is, this is a sustained and well-funded effort.
Yes.
To try to, if you can't win by legitimate means, win by illegitimate means. Let's discredit the press because that's a barrier for us getting what we want. And I get just like the idiot who wrote the article in the Federalist. I sent you, I think, early on in the list here, just a tweet kind of capsulizing the whole thing. So it's about 3/4 of the way down. Basically says, men in their 30s trying to have sex with 14-year-olds is a practice not without some merit. And if Roy Moore sexually assaulted my 14-year-old daughter, I'd kick him in the nuts right before voting for him. Those are quotes from this particular article. And, of course, you have the Project Veritas piece, which is totally nuts. But what I'm saying is that it isn't enough just to focus on the fact that, these people are crazy. You have to focus on who is funding them and what the goal is there, because they can't possibly do this on their own.
Yeah.
Somebody has to give you a magazine so you can write that crap.
Yes.
Somebody has to fund Project Veritas so you can spend a year trying to ingratiate yourself with Washington Post reporters.
Yes, that's an important thing to point out. Just to make it clear, she's one person and she's one of dozens, and they literally just say, I will give you money to live and pay for all your bills, and your only job is to try and set up some weird nebulous sting idea later. She spent months trying to, as they say,
She did that. She
infiltrate.
tweeted that on social media. She said, "I've lost my job, but
Yeah.
now I'm headed to New York City in order to take down the liberal media."
Right. And now
That's
that
my
was a
full-time job now.
GoFundMe.
Somebody's paying me to do this.
She put up a GoFundMe for that. But I mean, you don't just jump into that with a GoFundMe. You jump into that. You say, you can also put up a GoFundMe, but I'll give you $50,000 to go do that because I'm wealthy and I don't care about anything.
Right. So I'm just circling back and saying it's all about
Yes.
the donors. It's all about the donors.
I guess, all
whether
right.
it's looking to see what gets into the tax bill, it's all about the donors in terms of the slimy side.
All right.
In terms of trying to smear legitimate institutions to weaken the norms that we normally go by here so that we can get more of our agenda done. And it all comes back to the donors.
All right.
And
the
so,
donors.
I think a little transparency would be great. It'd be nice to know who is funding these people so you can do a proper reckoning of what's really going on.
Yeah. And or, carve them up.
Because their
and serve
business
them for
model
dinner.
is not going to be successful based on what they're doing.
no,
James
it
O'Keefe
never has
basically
been.
fails at everything he does. How is that leading to the fact that he's
I don't
making
know.
hundreds of thousands of dollars a year?
Yes.
On what?
I don't know.
paying
$300,000. Yes. $371,000, I believe he paid himself last year
and,
somehow.
And so where's that money coming from? How does he monetize his incompetency and failure?
If you have billions of dollars,
Behind you,
$371,000 is
then you
not
can.
much.
Who are they? Again,
Right.
that's my point. So let's not overlook that part of it, as dumb as what they're actually doing is.
Yes. All right. We should not. I wish I knew who they were so that we could begin boiling a reduction in which to cook them.
So anyway, so we got this tax bill coming up, and we're not totally sure what's going on. Again, if it fails,
Yes.
and right now it looks more like it'll succeed than fail, but if it fails, it'll be a slightly different cast than the ones who made the healthcare bill fail. But it'll be equally dramatic. So, it'd be great if that happened because it's a terrible bill. It'd be great if that happened because it'd be a political disaster for the Republicans. If it passes, it's going to be a political disaster for the Republicans, which I still don't understand why they don't get that part.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe they just don't want to stay.
Maybe they're doing a good job of getting themselves out. So let's look at some technical aspects of this, and we'll turn to Sarah Binder for that.
Okay.
She's got a piece here in the Monkey Cage blog, 3 reasons Republican senators will end up without real tax reform.
Real tax reform.
And every time I read her, I learn something, which is always every time I talk to you, I learn something about how Congress works. That's why we like to do this. I like to learn these things. First point, the GOP still isn't using regular order, whatever that means.
Right. And well put.
Right? She talks about the demise of regular order contributed to the GOP's failure earlier this year to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. McCain, most poignantly, argued that the legislative process stunk. Quote, we seem convinced that majorities exist to impose their will with few concessions and that minorities exist to prevent the party in power from doing anything important. That's not how we were meant to govern. That's a McCain quote. Mm-hmm. So McCain and Flake could oppose their party's tax bill based on that, in part because neither faces re-election.
Well, that would be good. I would take it. I don't depend on it or bet anything on it.
Her underlying point here, regular order is hard to define. For some, regular order simply means a return to past modes of legislating in a manner that's more bipartisan and less structured, or what political scientist Stephen Smith once termed collegial. Others say that regular order means allowing committees rather than party leaders to craft policy, and others use regular order as a call for colleagues to stop filibustering every vote. Whatever it means, it evokes a more fluid collegial process that is no longer used in today's more partisan Senate and polarized Washington. And, of course, that raises the question is, are we permanently stuck with this now? Is this the way it is from now on? So, again, that's one of the reasons why I think the article is so thought-provoking, that even though it seems to be a dry recitation of process. Point number 2, avoiding the filibuster has a steep cost. I don't think process is dry. I think it's important. And, this is another illustration why. GOP leaders have used the same special budget vehicle known as reconciliation for pursuing both healthcare and tax agendas. In exchange for allowing reconciliation bills to pass by simple majority, budget law narrowly limits the scope and cost of the bill. Process matters because it determines the bill's winners and losers. Constrained by budget rules, according to nonpartisan tax analysts, GOP leaders opted to protect corporations and the wealthy. In contrast, although most middle-class households would see at least a small tax cut for 2018, a decade later, taxes would likely go up for many of these same households. The policy choices no doubt drive the bill's remarkable unpopularity. So since they're constrained to do this, they're doing it to favor corporations. Not surprising. Guess what? That's where their donors are. I think you've heard that in the last few minutes. And then number 3, process amplifies partisanship and makes policy worse. Since World War II, Congress's landmark laws have typically been passed with bipartisan support. We still see an occasional bipartisan deal, but in our era of ideologically polarized and electorally competitive parties, Congress more often deadlocks. Relying on reconciliation is costly in 3 ways. It amplifies the partisanship that drives its use in the first place. It arguably makes policy worse. And reconciliation spotlights cleavages within the majority party, making it harder to blame the opposition for legislative failure, as we saw with the healthcare vote. And so those costs are a big deal. Eliminating the need for Democratic votes reduces already low incentives for bipartisan cooperation, and even red state Senate Democrats note that they've been shut out of the process, which is really a remarkable thing. You'd think if this turkey was to pass, you'd want Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Manchin's vote, or Joe Donnelly, or somebody who you would consider to be vulnerable. They're not even trying.
Yeah.
The result isn't
They'll
just more partisan Congress. They could have pursued real tax reform, not just cuts, but they didn't, and that's where we are.
Well,
I thought it was a pretty good article.
Yeah, I think so. Well summarized. There's
and
more.
Again, it's like a Vox planer. It's not like you didn't think of these things before. It's just nice to see it all wrapped up in one place for somebody who actually took the trouble to write it down.
Yes. The difference, I think, the difference I appreciate most between Sarah Binder and Monkey Cage splainers and Vox splainers is that, hers come without the tweet promotion that reads, here's everything you need to know because you're a dummy and you didn't know it about
right.
XYZ.
I did know it. I knew it yesterday. She's just an expert who tells you what you need to know, just like you.
Yeah, or I should start tweeting more things about being... I don't know. It seems to be very successful for Vox.
But yeah, no, she is a true expert, and I always enjoy reading her because she's always got something. So, yeah, I mean, it explains a little bit about how process underlies, what you wind up getting out of this. Why isn't this bill more bipartisan? Because the process doesn't really allow it. Mm-hmm. If you want more bipartisan stuff, you won't be using this process. The very fact that you picked this process means you're deliberately trying to be anything but bipartisan.
Well, yes. The way they use it, absolutely true. I mean, I guess originally, back in the day, the choice of reconciliation, I mean, while it certainly enjoyed procedural advantages because of the lack of the filibuster,
it was a discipline process.
Yeah,
get yourself disciplined and get the money lined up, and that's why the Byrd rules and all that sort of stuff.
You avoided the filibuster for the purposes of doing hard things that might be politically unpopular, but were supposedly, and maybe they're not, and others might argue about whether they're good or not, supposedly good for fiscal discipline or good because they involve fiscal discipline. And while that may not turn out to have been true, the idea was, look, we're going to use this process, but only if we start using it to bring the debt under control, and sometimes that'll mean raising taxes, and that's an unpopular and risky thing to do, and easily filibustered from a demagogic standpoint. So we'll just eliminate that and say, look, if we can't get a majority of the Senate to do the right thing, well, then we just don't have the votes for it. Fine, we'll try again later. But let's just have a straight up or down vote. Should we do this right thing the hard way? And that's what protection from the filibuster was meant to be. Not, well, now this means that we can exclude an entire major party from the negotiations. But that's what it's become.
So that's really my summary for today. Just wanted to talk about some of that stuff and put it in context. And, whatever happens today, I'm sure it's going to be a crazy day. But the fact is, Trump is mentally incompetent, and we really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Oh, well. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
With nuclear war in the balance, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I don't know. But we'll find out, surely. But I guess the only thing saving us at this point from total nuclear annihilation is, I know that Trump would like to play more golf and watch more TV, and that will become difficult in a post-nuclear environment.
So again, let's Axios actually sums this up pretty good.
Oh.
We just witnessed the most unthinkable 96 hours of Trump's reign. He called for a probe of the chairman of NBC News, a boycott of CNN, global skepticism of CNN International, public contest to crown the king of fake news. He told friends the Access Hollywood tape may have been doctored. Former President Obama may have been born abroad. He retweeted conspiracy theorists and unapologetically circulated videos aimed at demeaning Muslims. He sent his press secretary out to argue it doesn't matter if the tapes are fake because the threat is real. Elected Republicans, at least in public, seem fine with it all. They chuckle and say it's simply Trump being Trump. In fact, Orrin Hatch yesterday said he's the greatest president he's ever served under.
Well,
just to give you an idea what
Hatch
kind of person Orrin Hatch is,
serving,
right?
But okay, yeah.
Himself delusional. That's the thing. Delusional voters vote for delusional commander-in-chief and say, we got exactly what we wanted. Delusions. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and his staff seem fine with, or at least resigned to this reality. No one who matters is doing anything but egging him on. And so when the reckoning comes, and it will, the enablers who let Trump do this are properly going to be in the spotlight.
I hope so. They ought to be. I lose hope sometimes, but
it's a process, right?
Yeah.
First you get the House,
right,
maybe the Senate, and then you start hearings.
Yeah.
Real hearings, because when you have the majority, you have the power of subpoena.
And then you build a guillotine.
You build a case.
Okay.
You build a case.
What did I say? I meant case.
Yeah, that's what you meant. It goes in a case, right? You don't just leave it out there; it'll rust.
No.
You have to build a case around
right.
it.
Oil, polish, the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing. Anyway, you do it step by step.
Right. It ends with the guillotine. But okay.
I didn't say that.
I also didn't.
Yeah,
so,
you're just
there
hearing
you go.
voices in your head if
Right.
you heard that. So with that, thank you so much. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. Goodness knows where the show will go now. You got an hour and 10 minutes to hear the voices in your head and see what they're going to tell you.
Yes.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay. Thanks very much. I hope your laundry's dry by then. He hung up on me. All right. Well, anyway, he was supposed to. It was a scheduled departure, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I didn't mean those things I didn't say or something. And also they weren't real tapes and they were probably doctored. So I don't care if you have me on tape saying anything about whatever implement they used to brutalize and murder people during the French Revolution. I didn't say it. It was Donald Trump. He said it. And they used Photoshop, which doesn't even work for audio. So I don't know. Who cares? YOLO, nothing matters. Rounding up other things that also YOLO don't matter. There were some good comments and tweets and things that I saw over the last couple of hours that I wasn't able to squeeze into the discussion, but meant to. One, this tweet here from Josh Dorner, who I thought summarized things nicely. So nicely that I clicked on the wrong button and it went away. There it is. Speaking of Trump's retweeting of that insane lady's fake news anti-Muslim videos, you all know by now, I believe, that the reaction in Britain was essentially unified horror at his having done this. And basically, he was roundly condemned by everyone who matters in Britain for doing so. Josh Dorner noting this and, in fact, embedding the Kyle Griffin tweet, because Kyle Griffin is the only person on Twitter, apparently, and he covers everything. We read about that. Let's see. Kyle Griffin tweeted a video of Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott saying, Donald Trump retweeting Britain first is offensive to, quote, all decent British people. And of course it is. Although, not both sides aren't saying it quite the same way or with quite as much frequency, but there's a presence. Anyway, Josh Dorner noting they must be popping bottles in the Kremlin over the U.S. president promoting a fascist anti-Muslim group, and here's a key point, of the sort Russia promotes all over Europe. by the way, which in turn has created a political crisis driving a wedge between two anchors of the Atlantic Alliance. We now have an international incident as between the United States and the United Kingdom. The special alliance, of course, forged in fighting and pledging to defeat fascism worldwide. But, fascism. It's come back in fashion. That it almost rhymes. And so it's got to be worth something. But yeah, this is, I think, makes great points. Not only that they must be reveling in helping to fracture the alliance that for decades contained the Soviet Union and later Russia, but also, yes, that the United States president is retweeting and promoting exactly the sort of propaganda the Russians have been paying for and promoting all over Europe. It's that pervasive. And when you have an idiot president who you can have an idiot president of all sorts. There can be lots of kinds of idiot presidents. You could theoretically have one, but this one in particular comes from, from that world, and he's easily manipulable. He's gullible. He's empty-headed. He's lazy, and he'll do what you ask him to do so long as you serve it up to him right. If you praise him on Fox and Friends and then say some dumbass thing on Fox and Friends, he'll repeat that dumbass thing. If you pay for anti-Muslim propaganda and you plant it in a place or hand it to him via a person who also says, President Trump is the greatest, MAGA, he'll say thank you and retweet that dumbass propaganda. He's that vapid. And they know it, and they must have been going crazy. A huge twofer. A fight between the United States and Britain, and it's not even, it's not even real fisticuffs, but it's clearly the British standing and giving the side eye to America. What the hell? You guys are crazy. And that's problematic. And we can't work together on everything. All the warnings prior to his inauguration now echoing back in people's ears that you can't trust this president. The warnings to the Israelis. If you share intelligence with the United States now, it will get to Russia and Russia will give it to Iran. You have to watch out for that. Everybody's worried about the United States. Now, the British probably thought, well, at least we speak the same language. Literally. I mean, different dialect, yes. But so I think we can manage this in ways that other countries might be at a disadvantage, although they have very good English speakers in most of those other countries as well. Probably better than we do. But huge score to get a schism as between the British and the United States, and a double victory in that it was their own stupid experiment with anti-Muslim fascism across Europe that fomented this split. So they must be going crazy. It's a huge, huge victory. And yet we have nonsense like Bret Stephens insisting that Trump isn't mentally unwell. He's just Putin-esque. And he's not Putin-esque. He just simply is overly receptive to the dumb stuff that Putin is putting out. That doesn't make him Putin. I mean, even to the extent that if you set everything aside, every value judgment aside, and say, Putin is of interest to me because he's a quote-unquote strong leader, or whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, right? Well, an idiot who simply echoes everything he does or says isn't also strong. He's an idiot who echoes things. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could probably spend time trying to analyze whether that's really what Bret Stephens had to say. But you know what? Who cares? That's what I have to say. And I don't really know if I care whether I end up thinking, well, Bret Stephens didn't exactly say that and I'm portraying him unfairly. To hell with him. Screw him. I'm portraying him unfairly. Let him hang his hat on that for the rest of the day. Anyway, let's see. Other things that captured my interest. You can, if you were following the Twitter feed, you'd know them already. But let's recap some of these things. Of course, this morning, this morning's golden toilet tweets. I don't even know what this is about, but blah, 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 something, something, something. Donald Trump angry at the, quote, failing New York Times, who he tags with their Twitter thing. This is what he has to say. The failing New York Times has totally gone against the social media guidelines that they installed, wrong word, to preserve some credibility after many of their biased reporters went rogue, which he capitalizes. The social media guidelines he capitalizes, SMG, and went rogue, capital R. I don't know what that's supposed to be about. His random capitalization is troubling, but not an issue. But then he tags it Fox and Friends, which is his way of saying, that's where I saw it. Or sometimes, this is what I want you to see, and I want you to repeat it on the air for me. But he tweets at the television, is what has happened. The modern world, instead of yelling at the television, and I admit it, yelling at the television too, but not when I'm supposed to be working. That's an issue. He tweet yells at the television. Fox and Friends, I don't know what they were talking about, but that's what he spends his time doing. But P.S., he doesn't have time for watching TV. Just another of the categorical lies, which, as we were reading, was it the Schlesinger piece that Greg mentioned, which I did note again in the background, but didn't shout out in time. I note that he says, he utters untruths. He lies. Please, honestly, I would feel so much better. I would have this hope that we could actually do something about this stuff if you would just start saying lies. I know it's a tiny little thing. It's symbolic. It doesn't mean anything, or it could get you in trouble or whatever. But to think of the hope you would be giving the people, by which I mean me. And so I think there are probably others like me. But that's what he does. He tweets to Fox and Friends. There's another example of him tweet yelling at the TV, which I guess I will save for after our next break. I'm now 8 seconds behind, and that'll mean that my music doesn't line up exactly the way I want to when I'm editing this thing later. The things that trouble me, the minute detail into which I go to make a show, one-man show. Anyway, I will tell you about this other thing that I thought someone made a great point in catching, also about TV yelling, after this. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and I threatened before leaving that I had another tweet for you that was going to upset you with the way that Donald Trump anger tweets at the television. I don't know, maybe it won't upset you. We're all maybe numbed to it by now, but I'm entering this piece on the record nonetheless. A tweet from NYC Southpaw, a favorite of all of us here on the show. He says, this tweet, and I'll read it to you, this tweet is a Matryoshka doll of surrealism. Well, that's intriguing, right? What could that possibly be? He's speaking of the tweet by Dotard J. Trump, which he sent out last night. This, when exactly, I don't know, who cares? Last evening. And he writes this: the House of Representatives seeks contempt citations, which he then follows with a parenthetical question mark, right? The House of Representatives seeks contempt citations, question mark. What does the question mark mean? I don't know what that is, or why are they seeking it? I don't know what he's questioning. House seeks contempt citations against the Justice Department and the FBI for withholding key documents and an FBI witness which could shed light on surveillance of associates of Donald Trump. Big stuff. Deep state. Give this information, all caps, now. Hashtag, or not hashtag, at Fox News. Yelling at the television. Fox and Friends is over. They're not on in the evening. But Fox News is what he's watching because he's a couch potato, lunkhead moron and doesn't work. Period. End of argument. I don't golf. I don't watch TV. I've had enough of this. But yeah, it is a Matryoshka doll of surrealism. And I'll let him explain why eventually. But I mean, here are some other things. The less important layers of it are the stray question mark, don't know what that means. The fact that he doesn't space between justice and department, which might be just a typo, or it's just him and his random punctuation capitalization thing. But the House seeking contempt citations against the Justice Department and the FBI. That's actually a big, big thing normally. The House seeking contempt citations really against anybody, but against executive branch agencies, that's a big deal, usually. And it is a big deal even in this, but in a way that's highly unusual. But okay. And then, of course, why the subpoenas, why the contempt citations? For withholding key documents and an FBI witness, which is really should be who, could shed light on surveillance of associates of Donald Trump, which is the name of the person tweeting this thing. He's speaking of himself in the third person. Big stuff. Yeah. Good. It's a good intellectual summary of what happened. Big stuff. Deep state. Oh my God. It's Bannon. Give this information now. And then, of course, Fox News is his target for all this. So Southpaw continues. The president, this is what this means. Taking it all apart now. The president, who's watching all of this on TV, yes, but on a TV channel propagandizing on his behalf, is siding with Congress against the executive branch he runs with regard to Congress's demands to produce documentary evidence of surveillance that everyone says and his White House acknowledges never took place. Again, layer one, the president is watching TV and yelling at it. 2, he's watching the TV channel that propagandizes on his behalf and yelling at it. 3, they're yelling about Congress filing contempt of Congress charges against the FBI and Department of Justice, which he oversees as president of the United States. Why? In order to take the second, we'll do it in order of the articles of the Constitution and call Congress the first branch because Article 1, the presidency the second branch because they're in Article 2, and of course the judiciary, which hasn't come into it just yet, but can be the third branch because they're Article 3. So the president, first branch, is watching TV, which isn't a branch, by the way, despite what Donald thinks about it, watching TV, and they're complaining that the second branch is suing the first branch in order to get the first branch to turn over money. They're not suing. They're filing contempt of Congress. They're taking legal action in order to get them to turn over information to the second branch. And the guy in charge of the first branch is saying, yeah, the second branch is right. Now, that can happen from time to time. The president will realize you have a good point here. But again, we'll let Southpaw conclude in all of this. Forget the fact that he's yelling about surveillance that never took place. So fine. Congress is investigating something that never happened. They did it with Benghazi for years. We're used to it by now. Never mind that. Take note, but never mind that. The third tweet from Southpaw, or possibly, right? Remember where we left off here. Congress he wants them to give information to Congress to produce documentary evidence of surveillance that everyone says never took place. Or possibly, he could be talking about surveillance of Trump associates based on, of course, if it happened, warrants issued by the third branch of our government. Okay, so Donald Trump, second branch, is watching TV. I think I messed it up in the last retelling of it. The second branch is watching TV. He sees that the first branch is filing contempt charges against the second branch, insisting that the second branch turn over to the first branch, we have it right this time, all the information about surveillance that either didn't happen or, if it did happen, was authorized by the third branch. Second branch is angry that he himself, in other words, isn't turning over the information to the first branch. And, as Southpaw points out, what is Trump's supervisory tactic for obtaining the greater disclosure that he seeks from his own agencies, by the way, on behalf of the first branch, not him? The answer? Tweet at the TV. This is a why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself sort of situation. Donald Trump, in charge of the Department of Justice, in charge of the FBI, is angry that the Congress, who he's supposed to be, contesting and jealously guarding prerogatives against, because that's the way the Constitution's supposed to function. The genius design of the founders is that everyone would jealously guard their powers. Checks and balances, right? They would contest these things. Instead, the president says, I'm ready to surrender. Or rather, I would prefer that the Department of Justice and FBI surrender to the Congress and turn over the information that doesn't exist or whatever, right? I insist that it happen. So that's problematic in itself. But if it weren't and he wanted it to happen, or even if it is and he still wants it to happen, how, let me think. How could I, if I wanted the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to turn over information to Congress, how could I, little old President of the United States, get this to happen? What could I really do? I'm powerless. I'm powerless in the face of these tremendous forces. You are. I am. The other person listening to the show is. Hi, Mom. But other than that, no. What's the question here? You're the President of the United States. Do you want the Department of Justice to do something? Do you want the FBI to do something? Get them to do it. Okay, I will. Dear television, I don't like what I just saw. Everybody should find out. I'm angry. I just wanted to tweet that. Thank you very much, Dr. J. Trump. And that's it. Dear television, this is how he does. Hello, Jeff Sessions. You're the Attorney General. You're the head of the Department of Justice. Can we talk about what could be done here? Hello, Director of the FBI. What was the name of the jackass they installed there a while ago? I can't even remember. We haven't heard his name in a long time, which is probably a good thing. Call him up. I think you should turn this over. Now, they may say that's not the way it works, because it isn't the way it works. But they may say, we have really good reasons. I need to talk to your White House counsel. There's good reason why you don't want this to happen. All of this could be the upshot. But we'll never get to that, because his version of taking care of this job is, Dear television, the other day you said something that was really sad. I don't like it. It's bad stuff. Deep state. I wish it didn't happen. No! And that's how he handles constitutional crisis. Okay, that's normal. Don't worry about his mental capacity. He's not mentally unwell. Sure. Tell yourself whatever you need, I guess, in order to continue collecting your paycheck. Anyway, let's see. Other rather amazing things that I guess we could be talking about, aside from the Federalist thing, about which many good things have been said, by the way, including I didn't read the Federalist piece. I think it's probably too disgusting. And, but the one part that we didn't discuss yet that's also out there, although, I don't know, did we hint at it? I think Greg might have hinted at it and read a part that was a little bit like it. Here is one thing we know and should admit from the start. In his early 30s, Moore had a penchant for dating teenagers. Apparently, this was not an uncommon occurrence during this time. That is, for him, anyway. In fact, this practice has a long history and is not without some merit if one wants to raise a large family. The argument being made here, the disgusting argument is, well, if you want a large family, and Roy Moore says he does, he always said, what could I do? What could I do? I wanted a large family. And that means you get a young breeding mare, and you start him at 14, and you keep him barefoot and pregnant forever until you have 20 kids. That's because something, quiverful, yada, yada. And there's a whole evangelical cult around that that's stomach churning and disgusting, and we've discussed from time to time, and you already know about it. Okay. I don't even know how to get to this next part, but setting all of that aside, It was, I think, helpfully pointed out, okay, you're going to get yourself a teenager so you can start them early. It's late for you. And I'm going to have a huge family because I love to have like 18, 19 kids. Maybe I could get a reality show if this whole Supreme Court justice thing doesn't work out. Want to point out to you, he did eventually marry a woman considerably younger than him, at a older age, yes, but he ended up marrying a woman who was a classmate of the girls he was molesting years earlier. And it was only a couple of years later. Atrios notes for us, as the narrator says here, Roy Moore only had 4 kids. So he was sticking his hands down your daughter's 14-year-old pants. The 14-year-old daughter. I don't know how old the pants are. The pants are probably younger than that. So it's even more disgusting. I mean, all right. Well, anyway, he's sticking his hands down your teenager's pants because he wants to have what can you do? I mean, he wants to have a large family. Now, that's not going to work, by the way. You can't put your hands down the pants and just say, pull out a family. That's not going to work. But besides the biology of it, there's this. He never bothered. Once he finally found someone who was okay with being molested by him because she was an adult and I can decide such things, they didn't do anything. They didn't have 20 kids. 4. That's a fine number. And demographically these days, that's actually a relatively large family. Most people have 2 kids and stop. But interesting, of course, he's spending the rest of his time. And P.S. we shouldn't have birth control and there should be no such thing as abortion and everybody should have 20 kids and yada, yada, yada. This guy found a way. This is the guy. He cannot put aside his sexual drive long enough to stay out of the Gadsden Mall and stop bothering middle schoolers. But he gets married and it's been, 40 years, 4 kids. What's up? Why? Where's your 20? What happened to your quiverful? How'd you do it? None of my business, except for the fact that, of course, that you're making it everybody's business by insisting that we litigate these things in public. Fair question? No, probably not. And P.S. who cares? Roy Moore could molest my teenage daughter and I'd still vote for him. So what else are you going to do? YOLO, nothing matters. Okay. So, speaking of other things about YOLO, nothing matters, or I don't know what to do, or oh wells, gosh, what are we going to do about these things? Betsy DeVos, apparently, says here in the Hill, rips Trump for Pocahontas comment. We should reflect on things before we say them, she helpfully tells everybody. Oh well, too bad. I don't know. Is she resigning? No? Oh, okay. Well, duly noted. Thanks for saying so. That was real helpful. Okay. There's more, of course. But, I don't know. Should I keep running down the list of things that happened today? I warned you that this might happen. I warned myself that this might happen, that we might get very easily sidetracked by the morning's insanity and not get to the other story I wanted to share with you about sex predator James O'Keefe. I'm losing my track already. There's an awful lot of things out here. So let me turn to that just to make sure that I get that story out there, although it would make a fine Friday story, but this will leave more room for other things on Friday. I explained to you, I think, in plenty of detail. If you happen to miss Tuesday's show, I recommend it to you. I think we raked them over the coals pretty good. I have come to and am standing by the conclusion that James O'Keefe is a sex predator of exactly the type that we are falling all over ourselves to try to purge from public life elsewhere. But of course, only if they're Democrats. If they're Republicans, it's all good. And I gave you the one example, and really there's only one that you need, which is that he tried to kidnap and rape a CNN reporter to make a political point that CNN isn't a very good news outlet. And I'll show you how bad they are by kidnapping and attempting to rape one of your reporters and then videotaping her crying for fear of being raped. That seems like a good journalistic tactic, right? Certainly at least as good as spending months trying to, quote unquote, infiltrate the Washington Post. And then I guess they must have aborted that plan and instead said, I don't know, they thought this was going to work, right? You spend weeks hanging around with Washington Post journalists trying to insinuate yourself there so that you can, I presume, either get a job at the Washington Post or catch them on tape saying something damaging about the way the Washington Post works. But then you say, never mind, that's not working out, and Roy Moore wants this thing done instead. Let's try to plant the fake story. And you send this same person, and there was no fear. And, Washington Post is a big place. They got a big payroll, so the odds are you might actually be able to get away with this. But I would have thought, operational security-wise, I would have thought, maybe we need somebody else. Maybe we need somebody, because if she goes and she says, Roy Moore impregnated me when I was 15 and demanded that I got an abortion, and I want to tell you my story, like one of the reporters could say, that's weird. Aren't you the person that has been coming to Washington Post farewell happy hours and like employee farewell happy hours for people who are moving to different jobs for like months now and trying to become a journalist and trying to meet as many Washington Post reporters as possible? On top of all that, you're also in the middle of like the biggest, hottest story going right now. That's weird to me. That seems like the odds would be against it. But okay, they managed to find some reporters who hadn't met her yet. So they switched the job, right? And instead of trying to catch them on tape saying something weird and bad, try to plant this false story, they got busted on that. So James O'Keefe went back to, well, here's what we caught on tape. And of course, that ended up being Washington Post reporters saying, we're professionals. We approach every story with skepticism and let the facts take us where they may. And he's just literally standing there saying, this is a huge scandal for the Post. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that one because that one was out there. Oh, yes. All right. There was this other particular weirdness before I get to the James O'Keefe story that I wanted to share. Other particular piece of weirdness along with this. In case you hadn't heard it, this is important to know how sick and deranged and disturbed was this person that James O'Keefe set after the Washington Post? The answer is more sick and deranged than you might have thought. Yes, giving the full story is sick and deranged. Yes, it's doubly sick and deranged because it also would have undermined the claims of victims of sexual assault. Yes, it's also sick and deranged to lie to the newspaper in the name of Veritas, which is ridiculous on its face. But did you know that in addition to spending months trying to insinuate herself, and position herself somehow to do some nebulous unknown thing with all these reporters and attending their workshops and attending their happy hours and trying to befriend them and texting them after hours and all sorts of weird things, that she also, I guess she needed a place to stay, an apartment to stay in while she was in Washington trying to pull this stunt off, and that she decided, at random, I'm sure, to rent the basement apartment via Airbnb, but rent the basement apartment of Brad Woodhouse, the former, where did he work? Was it the DCCC that he worked at? I can't even remember what his credentials are, and we follow one another on Twitter. But you know how it is, trying to remember these things. So let me dig this up. Yeah, here we go. It's prominently featured in some of the Washington Post reporting. This one, Beth Reinhardt's reporting here. Undercover conservative activist rented basement apartment in home of top Democratic operative. I wonder what that was about. Shortly after announcing online that she was joining the conservative media movement, as Greg told us, Jamie Phillips, the woman who's doing all this nutty stuff, checked into an Airbnb apartment for a 2-week stay in the basement of the Capitol Hill home of Brad Woodhouse, the former communications director of the Democratic National Committee, DNC. Woodhouse said Tuesday he recognized her from seeing her picture and reading the story, and says, of course, I was stunned. It took a little while to sink in, and then I was like, really? Are you kidding me? James O'Keefe, blah, 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 declined to answer questions about whether he dispatched Phillips to rent from Woodhouse. Phillips didn't respond to inquiries, but just out of, pure coincidence, she ended up renting the place from the former communications director of the DNC, who had at that point gone on to work with a new group. Weeks before the 2016 election, Woodhouse was president of Americans United for Change, when two people associated with the liberal advocacy group were secretly filmed by O'Keefe's organization. In other words, they were trying to run a sting on the organization that Woodhouse then ran. And then they mysteriously, for some strange reason or possibly coincidence, rented his basement apartment. And I now would wonder, if I were him, and I'm sure he's wondering it, whether she rifled through his things, if that was possible, if she could access there from the basement, or whether she just was hanging around in hopes of surreptitiously tape recording him saying something, or maybe she could hear his phone calls in his office from her apartment. I don't know. But that seems pretty weird. That's how far they're willing to go. Not only, as Greg said, do we need to have now special training on campaigns on how to avoid being entrapped by wackos who are stalking you, but you got to worry about that in your house too. I guess that's the price of Airbnb and putting your parts of your house on the market for a side hustle, which, of course, you're going to continue to need to do as your taxes go up to pay for additional golf courses for Donald Trump. Okay, so our break is coming in a few minutes. Let's get started already on what else I was going to tell you. It's not just this one story of, what was it? It was Abby Boudreaux, James O'Keefe was trying to kidnap on the sex boat and frighten her so badly with the belief that she was going to be sexually assaulted that she began breaking down in tears, and he would capture all her sweet, sweet liberal tears on video in order to own the libs. Again, not a plan that makes any sense to anybody with a brain in their head, but for him, that was a win. He really thought, as I tweeted yesterday, and everybody wanted to share this one, and I urge you to continue sharing it, James O'Keefe thought it was a big political win to kidnap a lone woman and scare her so badly that she was going to be raped that she broke down in tears. Aha! Caught you, CNN. No, that doesn't make any sense. Well, maybe it's just an isolated incident. Not, by which I mean, not that he was luring her to an isolated place in order to perpetrate this incident. He was doing that. But I mean that there was another one. Oh, I didn't know that. And I didn't until it was brought to my attention through, the eagle eyes of lots of people watching my Twitter feed and reminding me that this other thing had happened. Now, I'm going to go to Mediaite.com, which also is always a little worrisome for some reason for me. But they usually get things pretty close to defensible, if not entirely right. Tommy Christopher had this story. This is way back in March of 2012. James O'Keefe accomplice, and that's in scare quotes, Nadia Nafi, to tell all. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I don't know. But the other day we found out about Izzy Santa, the woman who was working with James O'Keefe, who had an attack of conscience and just couldn't let the plan to kidnap and possibly rape Abby Boudreaux go forward and had to say something, and thank God she did. Well, it seems James O'Keefe, he's now going to establish for us, thanks to Mediaite, a pattern of this sort of behavior with his women, employees, accomplices, co-workers, etc. Conservative activist James O'Keefe is leaving a trail of disgruntled former associates in his wake, and this is in 2012. This is before the Abby Boudreaux story. He's leaving a trail of disgruntled former associates in his wake. That, I guess, means that, and there's some links here. There's even more. I didn't even read these things. But the latest, Tommy says, of these could deal a fatal blow to the Acorn auteur's reputation, and I guess it just didn't. It should have, but it didn't. What a story. Nadia Nafi, it's Naffe, by the way, who filed a criminal harassment complaint against O'Keefe in November, and that was back in 2012, of course, and it turns out that was dismissed due to jurisdictional issues, which is a bit of a problem. Anyway, she's begun publishing a multi-part series of posts to her blog, the first of which is entitled My Time as an Accomplice to Convicted Criminal James O'Keefe. And of course, he was a convicted criminal. He was convicted for the break-in to Mary Landrieu's office. Boy, Mary Landrieu, is she a woman or something? He seems to have some real problems with the women. Anyway, the next part, at the time, had not yet been published. The next part promises to elaborate on that November incident, which, along with Naffy's tantalizing Twitter feed, carries disturbing echoes of the Abby Boudreau CNN sex boat caper, which I guess means that I had the chronology wrong and the Abby Boudreau CNN sex boat caper came before. Still establishes a trail, right? Okay, we just didn't know which direction it was leading. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm back. I'm ready to try again. Right? Are you still with me? Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's a depressing day and a depressing show. Let me get through the rest of this story. More things happening, popping up on Twitter that deserve attention. We'll see what we can get through here. But now that we know which direction the chronology was running, we'll continue. Remember where we were. Nadia Naffy, at this point in 2012, accusing James O'Keefe of something yet more troubling even than the Abby Boudreau CNN sex boat caper, as he likes to call it. Wasn't a caper. He was trying to rape her. There. It rhymes. You can remember it that way. O'Keefe, who has seen his media buzz steadily decline, was perhaps most damaged by reports of a failed plot to sexually humiliate, and that's key. That's good phrasing way back in 2012. That's the key to the whole thing. A plot to sexually humiliate then CNN correspondent Abby Boudreau, who's now with ABC News. She reported in September 2010 that based on documents and eyewitness accounts, and we went over all of them, James O'Keefe had planned to lure her onto a boat filled with sex toys and hidden cameras. The plan called for the boat to set sail with O'Keefe and Boudreau on board so that the reporter would be unable to escape, at which point O'Keefe would try to, quote, seduce her. That's rape. He says seduce because I don't want to say rape because then I'll really be in trouble. Seduce. That's the word I'll use. I was going to seduce that 14-year-old, Roy Moore might have said. Then she would have wanted it, you see. The plan called for the, quote, prank to end with Boudreau in tears begging to be let off the boat. Which, by the way, you know what would have been hilarious? The prank ending with Boudreau producing a stiletto and stabbing him through the neck, thinking she was going to be raped, and macing him in the eyeballs and tearing his throat apart with a pocket knife. That would have been hilarious. Ha, ha, ha. But that won't happen because it's just a prank and she'll never react that way. And, well, why wouldn't it? But, okay. It didn't because she didn't get on the boat, thanks to Izzy Santa. Well, you know, it certainly could have been the outcome, right? I mean, I know that's crazy and maybe I shouldn't spend my time fantasizing about that. Although, honestly, seeing him, you know, attacked and, let's say, put in his place by somebody that he thought he was setting up for one of his pranks where he tries to rape you, that would be rather satisfying. But remember that this is not my idea. I don't like this idea. This is terrible. I don't advocate for this. It's the conservatives, the quote-unquote conservatives, who are advocating for this. Everybody needs a gun. There wouldn't be rape culture on campuses or anywhere else if women had the guns that we want to give to them, and you libtards won't allow us to. Okay, fine, sure, right. Okay, so tell me that you'll still be for this and that you won't have any trouble. And, of course, she'll get to walk, no prosecution, because stand your ground, right? When Abby Boudreau pulls a gun out of her purse and shoots and kills James O'Keefe on video, they're not going to say, this is outrageous. It's the liberals who are violent here. No. They'll say, you know what? You got us dead to rights in this one. I can't argue with you because this is my platform on guns. And, sure, whatever. Okay, fine. I believe that 100%. Anyway, so the plot was foiled when conscience-stricken O'Keefe associate Izzy Santa warned Boudreau minutes before the, quote, caper was to take place. Even conservatives were quick to denounce O'Keefe, one person did, whose antics were already wearing thin with them. according to the links here. O'Keefe later said that he rejected some elements of the plan, but Boudreaux stood by her reporting, and O'Keefe offered no evidence to support his claim, as usual. In an October interview, I asked O'Keefe why he hadn't released the emails or other evidence that would show he rejected the plan. O'Keefe told me that such emails do exist, but that he doesn't plan on releasing them. It's standard MO, right? I have proof that I wasn't really going to do that. Oh yeah? Release it. Well, I'm not going to do that because you're liberal or whatever. Naffy's complaint, let's just get on to that, alleges that O'Keefe invited her to his New Jersey home. See, I knew on Tuesday when we were talking about this that he had a New Jersey home, and he was on probation already, right? Why was he hanging out in Lusby, Maryland? What was that? Who, by the way, I mean, I don't know, or you might have property. I suppose it's as likely as anything you'd have property both in New Jersey and Lusby, Maryland. But his property and a boat and all that, who owns all this crap? He wasn't getting the $300,000 at that point. All right. Come to my New Jersey home to work on a project where she was to stay in a finished barn to save money on hotels. I hope that was completely finished. They got into an argument, according to Naffy, and O'Keefe abandoned her in the barn, refusing to take her to a train station so she could go home. All right. Naffy also alleges that she began to feel physical disorientation. Like you might say, all right, we'll just leave the barn. You won't take me to the train station. Maybe they didn't have Uber at the time or whatever. Or you can't, I don't know where I am. I could see feeling trapped, certainly. But on the other hand, set the barn on fire and run. But okay, I don't want to lecture people. And I'm sure she thought this clearly can't really be getting out of hand the way it seems like. I'm thinking the worst. I'm imagining things. This is a professional relationship. He's a known person. This clearly isn't going to go where I think it's going to go, like where he hits the button under his desk and locks the door. Yes, I'm talking about, yeah. All right. I just make one nod at least to the Matt Lauer story. Now that we know exactly what went on there, or what was alleged anyway. I was wondering the other day, all I knew was he was being fired and I didn't know. Is he one of these guys who's just pulling his pants down and just exposing himself at work? That can't be, right? Matt Lauer. Yeah, he is. And worse. But okay. I'll finish this story first. So, all right. Maybe he's not going to do this. Maybe I'm overreacting. I don't know. But then this part really gets you. Naffy also alleges that she began to feel physical disorientation. Not just because of the barn and, gosh, I can't get to a train station. Listen to this. And was eventually unable to move under her own control after sharing beer with O'Keefe. He put something in her drink. She said O'Keefe and a friend eventually did drive her to Penn Station in New York, and that O'Keefe and his friend had to help her into the car, and that she passed out during the ride. She says she woke up at the train station and later noticed items, including her panties, missing from her luggage. A merry prank. He's a prankster. He roofies the girl and steals her panties because Veritas. Got it? In the first part of her tell-all, Ms. Naffy talks about an early O'Keefe investigation into someone else. We never heard about this one because this one, I guess, also fell flat on its face. But would you like to take a guess? I mean, I don't know if you'll guess in time, but when I say the name, you'll say, okay, an early O'Keefe investigation into Representative Maxine Waters that she participated in. Miss Nadia Naffy is African-American, I hasten to point out. And I wonder whether she was hired for that purpose. I don't know. She seems intelligent enough, but intelligent enough to work at Project Veritas anyway. I don't know whether that's a compliment or not, but okay. So she was, where were we? She was, the first part of her tell-all, she talks about an early O'Keefe investigation into Maxine Waters that she participated in, but which she says was quashed in the wake of the Shirley Sherrod scandal. Boy, they were targeting a lot of black women. She says she later wrote to Representative Waters to ask for forgiveness. However, at the end of the piece, she promises to discuss the barn incident in part 2. I don't know if she ever got to this, and her blog is gone, by the way. While many details were included in Nadia Naff's testimony at that harassment hearing, her Twitter feed hints at much more. in response to a tweet from the late Andrew Breitbart about a lawsuit pending between O'Keefe and current TV's Keith Olbermann and David Schuster. Naffy hinted at the deeper nature of her allegations. I don't know whether these manic tweets really help untangle anything, but they are listed here. Breitbart tweeting to her, "There is no, quote, rape plot. You slanderous, libelous, wannabe Media Matters smear junkie." And also included in the tweet, David Schuster and James O'Keefe. Nadia responds, "Now you're an expert in rape plots? I called you that night I was held in the barn to ask for help, Andrew Breitbart." In response to another tweet from a user calling her a piece of S, of course, Ms. Naffy retweeted the following. Somebody else saying on her behalf, I guess, Occupy Rebellion, saying to Sarah C. Goldstein and Nadia, "Why is she a piece of S, Sarah? If James drugs you and tries to rape you, you better keep quiet, right?" It does hint at a sort of darker past and maybe a pattern of behavior for James O'Keefe after all, doesn't it? Her Twitter feed, Tommy Christopher continues here in Mediaite, her Twitter feed is filled with other clues about what she calls her ordeal that night in the barn. That's the quote, including this reference to the Abby Boudreaux sex boat story. "Yes, I know about the foiled plot against Abby Boudreaux. Glad she was not imparted by substances," I think she means impaired by substances, "and was able to escape." Elsewhere in the Twitter feed, Nadia hints at details of an allegation by sex boat whistleblower Izzy Santa. I guess she's been on Twitter as well. So here a note to, let's see, elect Marco Rubio is involved in this conversation, and Nadia as well. Izzy Santa's lawyer writes a mean demand letter. I still don't get why James O'Keefe showed up to take a bath at her apartment. I guess I'd be puzzled about that too. And Nadia continues saying, "I have never, and I mean never, had a male colleague show up at my place, strip down in my bathroom, and take a shower. Never." She's having a conversation with elect Marco Rubio, whoever that is, obviously thinks it's a totally normal thing to do. She also tweets, "James was there because he wanted, quote, lovey-dicey kiss. God only knows what the hell that's supposed to mean. He swore he'd never had sex with Izzy, but it sure looks like he tried, elect Marco Rubio." That's some conversation, right? Tommy says, "I contacted James O'Keefe for comment on this story. Aside from wondering if I really wanted the truth or simply wanted to smear him, O'Keefe launched his own smear at Nadia Naff via email from James O'Keefe. He has this: the outcome of the probable cause hearing speaks for itself." Of course, it doesn't. It was a jurisdictional issue. "If you refuse to publish the fact that this person was arrested for domestic violence in 2001, public record, and you refuse to publish the fact that this person sued the Bush-Cheney campaign in 2004, you will be acting in willful disregard for the truth." Because he knows how to write, because he's a journalist. That's what he has to say. By the way, of course, at that time, James O'Keefe was himself, also had been arrested and convicted in the Mary Landrieu caper. But that's, of course, neither here nor there. "If you refuse to publish this, you will be acting in willful disregard for the truth. I'm sorry, and that's totally a crime and everything, right? Consider it done, James." I guess by quoting the email, it's done. Nadia did sue the Florida Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, and the Bush-Cheney re-election campaign in 2004, by the way, for racial discrimination, a racially hostile work environment, and retaliation, which I guess makes her guilty of working while black. It's also true that she was arrested and cleared of domestic abuse, according to court records, which I guess speaks for itself, right? That makes her guilty of nothing. Neither of these facts appear to have any relevance to Miss Naffy's allegations, but it is instructive that when asked for comment regarding the story, Mr. O'Keefe opted to attack the accuser rather than speak in his own defense. That may change once Nadia Naffy finally publishes the rest of her story, but I don't know whether she ever actually did. There's an update at the bottom that says, shortly after the story was published, James O'Keefe sent the following additional comment. Okay, here it is. No, informing you about the existence of public court records that speak to possible motive was not my only comment to you. For the record, I break a huge story about dead people getting ballots in Vermont. Everyone remembers that huge story, right? You ignore this, and 2 days later, you bring up this issue, which was dismissed months ago. You journalists clearly want my scalp by running lies and fabrications. This is a blatant smear, but it'll take a bullet to stop me. My price is my life. Dun, dun, dun. He's such a hard guy. Yeah, so that's where we are with him. That's where we were with him in 2012. So, interesting, right? He's got a bit of a pattern and, of course, a bit of braggadocio going on as well. It'll take a bullet to stop me. Yeah, I think probably a firm stick would probably stop you in most instances. But, if it's a bullet you want, I mean, you're free to do it anytime. Just pick up any gun you have and use that bullet to stop you. I encourage you to do so. But everyone's supposed to be scared of him now because it'll take a bullet to stop him. Oh, no. What a jackass. We're ruled by these idiots, too. Anyway, I mentioned to you that there were a couple other things that were popping up, some tweets that I think deserve some attention, including some which have been sent to the KITM hashtag. Let's catch up on some of those comments so that you know what's going on leading into the day. We'll discuss them further on Friday. Parlio checking in with the UK perspective here, sending me the tweet of Sam Coates. Is Sam Coates from the Times of London? Sam Coates Times, of course, is the name of the Twitter account, and I doubt very much whether that's the name of the publication. It's probably the Times of London, for which Sam Coates works. Donald Trump is facing unprecedented criticism in the Commons chamber today. MPs calling him fascist, stupid, spreading evil and racist or incompetent or ignorant or all three. Remarks of a vehemence never heard before about a U.S. president in the UK Parliament. I imagine it's rather a unique situation. Yes. The Warlock is in and has this question for us. Will UK issue have consequences? Yes, but I don't know what. Who knows? I mean, at this point, are those tweets that he sent the reason that there's a rift between intelligent people and Donald Trump, some of those intelligent people living in the UK and running their government, or at least holding high-ranking positions in their government, if not at the very top? It's just one of several factors. Do I think it's going to have an impact? Yeah, it's going to have consequences. There's supposed to be a lot of intelligence sharing, anti-terrorist intelligence sharing going on between our government and theirs, and I don't know if that's going to continue anymore. All right. There's more, and damn, so many things happening. I don't know what to focus on. Let's look also. Greg Dworkin sent us this after his stint on the show, a tweet from Clifford Levy saying, breaking, President Trump has soured on Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and is planning to replace him with CIA Chief Mike Pompeo. Interesting idea, and leads us to another story, which I think we'll have to discuss on Friday, which is, if you notice this weird stuff that's happening here, like what did we find out the other day? He needs a new opioids SAR. And so, he's going to, I think he had originally said that maybe Jared Kushner was going to take care of that too. And it's not working out. Kellyanne Conway, the new opioids SAR. And it made me wonder, is that like that we don't know like anybody else? Does he literally not know anyone but his inner circle, so he's just going to move her over to there? And it makes you ask the same question. Again, Mike Pompeo, CIA chief now, he's going to move him over to Secretary of State. Has this happened as many times in any other administration, by the way? Think about what went on here, right? Kelly, who's chief of staff, was previously Homeland Security. And I need a new chief of staff, so I'm going to take somebody, or he doesn't know anybody else to go to. But I think what's happening here is, has more to do with what happened at the CFPB the other day. Remember, where he moved Mick Mulvaney over there, and the argument was that he not only that the president had the right to name the new acting director. Is it director? Versus what the statute actually said about the current director being able to elevate somebody to deputy and then taking over upon his departure. There was a second argument here, which was that the president was within his rights to have this person direct the agency, even on an interim basis, and perhaps without any cap on the amount of time, if he moved, according to the Federal Vacancies Act, a person who had previously been approved by the Senate for some, not cabinet, necessarily cabinet level, but if they occupied a job where they required Senate clearance, the Senate's advice and consent, they could move over to another job without having to go through that process again. And you remember how Democrats stretched that process out with what tools were remaining to them. And of course, that also meant hearings and the opportunity to grill them and show that they were liars in public on television. That's not good for the administration. Why is it that Mulvaney has dual jobs now? And the reason is either Trump doesn't know anybody else, or anybody he would name to the position, it would take months to get them there and they'd be publicly grilled and possibly humiliated. Remember, his record at getting people into these jobs is actually awful. More people had to drop out of the process during the nominations game for Donald Trump than probably anybody in recent memory, because they're all corrupt and horrible and stupid and unqualified. So why go through it? I'll just move somebody else over. And that's what's, I think, driving the Pompeo thing. It's not that the CIA chief isn't busy. It's that, I don't want to go through a confirmation process again. And we're probably going to end up shuffling people around. Maybe he doesn't think the CIA needs a director. That's possibly true, too. Anyway, there's more, of course, and more capers going on at the cabinet level. Pete B2 has sent us this one, and one that I spotted this morning and didn't get a chance to get to. And I'll share a couple of different perspectives on it, I think, before we end the show today. Pete just says, whoa, hashtag KITM. Here's the story. A tweet from Seth Hanlon that says, OMG, we knew it. Mnuchin has been lying all along. Here's the deal. Whistleblower says the Treasury analysis showing that the tax cuts in the new tax bill that they're cramming through in the next day or so, the Treasury analysis showing that the tax cuts pay for themselves, which we all knew was going to be bull, that Mnuchin has been promising, that is the analysis, and even suggested already exists, does not exist at all. Career economists shut out of the process. Yeah, let's take a quick look at that one. And just to catch up with the things, Seth Hanlon, by the way, senior fellow at American Campaign for American Progress, former special assistant to President Obama for economic policy, et cetera, et cetera. And here a clip from one or another of the newspaper stories about it. Those inside the Treasury's Office of Tax Policy, which Mr. Mnuchin has credited with running the models, say they have been largely shut out of the process and are not working on the type of detailed analysis that he has mentioned. An economist at the Office of Tax Analysis who spoke on the condition of anonymity so as not to jeopardize his job, and what's the point? Go ahead and jeopardize it. You're not doing the job. Said Treasury had not released a dynamic analysis showing that the tax plan would be paid for with economic growth because one did not exist. Oh, no wonder they haven't gotten around to releasing it. And I understand. He's not doing a job, so what's the risk? The risk is he's going to have no paycheck and his family's going to starve. That's basically what it is. So that's a New York Times report. Seth provides the link in his next tweet, noting also that Mnuchin said on November 13th that they had already published this now realized to be non-existent analysis. Here's Mnuchin 2 weeks ago telling the Wall Street Journal CEO Council that Treasury had already done a macroeconomic analysis and that our view is that this will pay for itself. He was lying. There was no such analysis. Mnuchin Flax even basically walked back that bold-faced lie in that same article, promising that the analysis would be forthcoming. And that was apparently also a lie. All right, you caught us. There's no analysis, but we're doing it. And then they weren't. And remember, it goes on to say, Mnuchin's hacks disappeared from Treasury's website. A study by the career professional economists finding that corporate tax cuts mostly benefit shareholders, not workers. And they're all out there now saying, what are we going to do with our tax cut? Well, we're not going to hire anybody else. We'll give it away in dividends, I guess. Seth says, I was told that over the strong objections of the career staff, by the way. Did Mnuchin's people lie to Bob Corker's face? They showed up in his office on Monday without the analysis of the tax plan they'd promised and told him there's no modeling yet. Yet, they're voting on this bill. What are you talking about yet? Now we know there's no modeling at all. So what else have we seen here? He says, things we haven't seen that any normal treasury would have produced with a tax reform bill in the offing. Distributional tables, static venue and revenue analysis, views on the technical aspects of the bill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Reporters need to keep asking questions. That's absolutely true. Justin Wolfers had this to say on the question. Mnuchin's lie might be the most breathtaking of all. His entire argument for his tax cut is that it'll goose growth. He claims that a Treasury analysis shows this. He promised to release that analysis. And now a Treasury whistleblower reveals he never even asked for any such analysis. Not that they didn't finish it in time or that he spiked it when it didn't come out right. He never asked. That's what it says. Those inside Treasury's Office of Tax Policy, which Mr. Mnuchin has credited with running the models, say they've been largely shut out of the process. We just talked about that. But yeah, they never even, oh yes, this is the economist who was worried about jeopardizing his job. I have a feeling they're going to catch you, by the way. I don't know how many analysts there are, economists in the Office of Tax Analysis. I imagine they have quite a few. But we'll hope that I don't know. Do I hope that person's job stays safe? Maybe they'd be better off getting fired and having everybody do a GoFundMe fundraiser for him or her. After all, I did see, I took a peek the other day at Julie Briskman's GoFundMe campaign, up to $131,000 now. I think their target was only $100,000. So I think she's going to be taken care of. That's good. We should do one here because, we could use it. Oh, and by the way, thanks also to Justice for including our little infomercial about donating via Patreon, which I've been including in the podcast in our live feed. We'll try and remind everybody of these things from time to time. We've had a great month, by the way. I guess I'll just wind up this way by saying we're going to top the 250,000 downloads mark for the month of November, which is terrific. It's great growth. Now we need to figure a way to turn that into great growth in fundraising as well. In my little ads, I've been telling you that thousands of you have been downloading the show each month, but only about 1 in 25 or so listeners was actually making a contribution via Square Cash or via Patreon. And that wasn't an awful situation, obviously, and we're making it. But I appreciate the help of all of you who have stepped forward to allow us to make it. It's made a great difference at home. I can tell you that much anyway. But the numbers have gone up dramatically, as I've mentioned. We have 250,000 downloads for the month, and now we're running something like 12 to 15,000 downloads a day, which is terrific in terms of growth of the show, but that skews the numbers. We're now at less than 1 in 100 people who are downloading the show on a more or less daily basis, actually contributing. And in fact, it's closer to about 1 in 125. So, while I appreciate the growth, I hope that you will appreciate the show. Those of you who are helping us grow and can visit patreon.com/KagroX. You can find the links in any of our posts, and you can find it that way, and maybe help us out a little bit, or maybe a one-time donation is your thing. Find any of our posts and find our Square Cash link, and you can just drop a couple bucks in the bucket that way. We work hard. I work hard. And it's hard to sit through these shows too, I know, but it would be great to be able to professionalize the operation just a little bit more, and we hope if you're enjoying it, you're going to be willing to help us do that. 1 in 125 downloaders each day is not a really great turnaround in terms of fundraising, most people will tell you. Anyway, another fantastic individual who's working hard to bring you great programming is coming up next. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. Here's what he's got on tap for you today. Let's get right to that. Arkansas has cut off Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood over discredited sting videos. Again, they keep doing this. The Trump administration is using a shady loophole to circumvent Senate confirmations. We began on that one, and it could violate federal law. And Trump's Health and Human Services nominee wants to balance reproductive rights with, quote, the conscience of the employer. If they've got a conscience anyway. I'll tell you what else he's got set for you after this short message.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Wow, another giant iceberg broke off of another glacier, this time Chile's Gray Glacier. Rising seas will erase most of the record of the last several thousand years of human occupation in U.S. coastal areas. Whoops. And a new translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls is unveiling new mysteries from the time of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. That's way long ago.